right. Hi, Katie. Welcome to the podcast. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
I am so excited to chat with you because I have just been a little fly on the social media wall. We had to have met in person ages ago. I don't know, we were in the wrestling scene because how old are you?
I turned 31 this year.
Yeah, so I'm just like a year older. So we were growing up, I'd see you, and it's so cool to reflect back now and see where you are having continued on with wrestling. And so, yeah, I've just been watching you traveling the world, training like crazy, absolutely crushing it, and now on your way to the Olympic trials, which is so exciting. So we'll get into it, but I want to start with how do you keep yourself well? Because I'm sure wellness looks many different ways right now with how you're training, especially.
Oh, yeah, that's a really great question. It's really difficult. I guess I should say it's very easy to fall into just the ebbs and flow of training, and it just kind of it can suck you in very quickly. And there's always something you're prepping for, or always something that you could be doing better, and something that you could be getting stronger at or trying harder at. And it's when you have this big dream or this big goal, you want it so badly, and it's so easy to just kind of fall into that, and then your wellness can very quickly fall to the wayside, and then you see it affecting your performance, you see it affecting your sleep, your eating, your all of it. And so I think when because I left wrestling for a little while and came back, and when I came back, I had such a different perspective about how I was going to compete and what training was going to look like for me, and that I wanted to really enjoy it, and that this is like the coolest adventure ever. And if I look at it that way while I chase a dream, then
Mm.
it allows me to kind of put my wellness at equal priority to the dream and to the what I'm trying to accomplish and whatnot. So there's a lot of different pieces that fall into that, and on how to keep that wellness at such a priority. Um, but it really seems like it's the small details that go the longest way for me.
Well, I love that because it's reframing how you look at it, where those things are not taking time away from making you a better athlete. They're actually supporting it. I think that's something that is so difficult at that highest level that you're at. It's like, well, what if my competition's training right now? And, what if I don't use all of this time accordingly? But knowing that it actually can support you to be more balanced and also enjoying it. Like, what fun is achieving the dream if you're miserable the whole every step of the way, which I think at any level of really high athletics is hard not to fall into that, but especially wrestling because it's just so physically and mentally demanding in just a different way.
Mhm.
I love that. So what does that look like? Just little self-care aspects throughout the day, rest days, any routines and rituals?
Yeah, I've kind of I've experimented a lot over the last couple of years, and some things that I've fallen into that I really like is taking time for yoga. I know I post a lot about that, is just doing like a quick 20-30 minute yoga flow in the morning, of maybe it's stretching, maybe it's like a more intense flow, but just something to get my body moving, and to kind of shut off and unplug from everything else. Journaling is very important for me, to be checking in to see how I'm actually doing. And so sometimes if I'm looking back and I'm realizing, oh, I've had a lot of dump journals where I'm just really upset and things aren't going well. And it's like, okay, I got to switch something up, because clearly it's really affecting my mental state and where I'm at and how I'm looking at things. And so journaling is a really easy way for me to kind of gauge where I'm at and where things are at. And if I need to make some corrections and make more space for happiness or wellness, or myself in general, then it's small things like taking my dog out more often, or doing some social check-ins, or just maybe saying no to a practice and just being like, okay, you know what, today I'm going to watch a movie. And you just kind of like, this is life outside of wrestling. And remember, there is life outside of wrestling, and there's so much going on that can also bring you happiness. And so it's a really hard battle. It's very conflicting, because like you said, there's always that little voice being like, well, what's my competitor doing right now, and what's my opponent doing? And I said I wanted to be the best. Am I doing everything in my power to make myself the best? And at the end of the day, did I do everything I could today to get a little bit better? And a lot of times that answer is no, because that's the perfectionist, that's the high, being an elite athlete, but giving yourself some room for error in there. And then that kind of comes back to the journaling, that I'm checking in the journaling and just seeing, is it working? Am I feeling light? Am I feeling excited for the day? Am I feeling motivated still? Or am I feeling really defeated and frustrated, and kind of doing those personal check-ins?
I love that. Just a little assessment to take a pause. And do you follow anyone specific for yoga? What style of journaling do you do? I love picking people's
Yeah,
brains.
I stumbled upon this woman. Her name, it's called Yoga with Adrienne,
Oh,
and it's just on YouTube. And she is so funny, and like she'll break out into song halfway through, and she doesn't take herself too seriously. And I love it. I love, like, she's always kind of encouraging you to laugh throughout, and it just kind of lightens everything up. So I'm very obsessed with that one. As far as journaling, I've recently, like as in a week ago, just started doing more gratitude-based journaling. And so it's kind of a structured, 3 to 5 things you're grateful for, what things went well yesterday, what standards did you meet or not meet, and why. And then the last one is who am I and what is today going to mean to me? And that who am I has been so challenging for me, because you have to like really compliment yourself almost, and then but also just shift your mindset for the day. So it's like, I am resilient, I am strong, I am all these things that just like, they feel cheesy, they feel ridiculous, they feel like, oh, I'm patting my ego going into a day. But it's like, no, I need to remember that, so that when this day gets really hard, at 4:30 leading into practice time, and it's been a long day, and this is when my work starts, I have to remember I'm resilient, I'm strong. And so it's been a big shift. It's been interesting.
I love that. Well, and it's a powerful adjective that's almost like a mantra for the day that you can take with. And I love yoga with Adrienne and Benji, who is always
Yes, Benji, that's right. Yeah.
special appearances. I recommend her to lots of clients because she has just like options for all levels, and I think makes it really accessible. And I think yoga, I love yoga and recovery. And when you're training how you are, like that type of recovery, I'm sure just goes such a long way. And then that mental break where you can actually take yourself out of the thinking about what's next and just being in the present moment, which is probably easier said than done. So, I mean, I know that this has been a very long journey for you, but I would love for you to walk us through like when and how did you start wrestling? How did you end up coming back from retirement, and what has gotten you to this place now?
Oh my gosh, it's been, I mean, sport is a roller coaster for everyone, I'm sure. A roller coaster feels like an understatement for me. I got into it in high school. It was my older brother, Josh, that said it would be a great workout to get me in shape for hockey, because I was playing hockey at the time. And so I started it. I fell in love with it. I had a great coach in high school that was just so positive. And so from there, I was kind of hooked, but I was also rodeoing at the same time. And so
Oh,
after high school, I actually had a scholarship to the Missouri State to do rodeo. And so I was done wrestling. Like, I had given my boots away. I was just like, yeah, that was fun. That was great. But like, I'm going to Missouri for rodeo scholarship. And it was Todd Hines, the coach at the time, that convinced me to defer the scholarship a year and just try the Husky room and see how you feel, see if you like it. And so I did that, and I loved it, and then started a rodeo team at the U of S so that I could do both for a little while. So I was doing the dual sport athlete thing, and that kind of led me in and out of the room a few times. Like, I left for 1 year to start the rodeo team. I had some injuries that took me out for a season or two, things like that, that it was just very inconsistent as to how often I was training and competing and whatnot. And uh, I think it was 2015, I decided I was done rodeo. I needed to focus fully on wrestling. I could rodeo for the rest of my life, but wrestling like was a here and now sort of thing. And that was the first year I won Can West, and the year after that was the first year I won U Sports. So it was a very rewarding decision to make.
yeah.
And after that year, so I won U Sports at the end of my business degree, so I graduated. And everybody was saying, oh my gosh, you've got all this untapped potential and you need to keep going and you need to do a senior push and Commonwealth Game trials are this fall and you got to do that. And you have to, you have to, you have to. And I just kept being like, okay, yeah, like why not? And why not is not a very good why, as it turns out, for doing something. Because wrestling is hard, like it's so demanding and there's so many grueling days and there's so many hard practices where you're constantly questioning what your why is and why not was not strong enough. And as I left the varsity scene and was now had a full-time job and I was in a long distance relationship at the time, and suddenly I was sacrificing so much to be wrestling and I hated it. Like I love being an athlete. I love the nutrition component. I love the strength and conditioning component, but then it was the 2 hours on the mat that I was dreading. And it got worse and worse the closer I got to competition. And one day I was walking into practice and was just kind of lost in thought and not really paying much attention. And then all of a sudden I realized that the thought that had just gone through my head was maybe today I'll break a bone so I don't have to compete. So I have like a legitimate reason to not have to compete. And it stopped me in my tracks. Like instantly I stopped, I turned around and I left. And I was like, I don't have to be here. Like this is supposed to be for my benefit and for me to pursue something. And I hate it. Like I hate it so much to the point where I'm hoping I get injured. Like that's terrible. And so I left. I quit. I told my training partners, my coaches, I was like, I'm done. I'm retired. This is it for me. And I was in the workforce and I joined the real world and I got to experience fitness for fun and I was training for a Tough Mudder and just like the coolest things where I got to really change my relationship with activity and sport and competition and then just slowly realize what was it that I loved about wrestling and what was it that I loved about competition and what was it that I loved about the really hard training sessions because I was craving it again. I was like, okay, not very many people crave like the sprints at the end of a practice. And here I am, like I was finding myself really missing it. And so that summer of 2019, I actually starting my nursing degree at that time. And I had 1 year of eligibility left. And so I had Vanessa Brown, my once teammate, now coach, always a friend. And she really pushed me that summer. And she's like, if there's any party that wants to come back, Olympic trials are this December, you should, this is like a great time for you to come back. Like you've got it in you. We see it in you. And now I think you finally see it in you. And I was like, I've actually been thinking about it for a little while now.
Wow.
So decided to come back, but we kept it a secret. I didn't want the rest of the coaches to know. I didn't want the team to know. I wanted to be doing it for me. Like I was there for training partners is basically what I said. I was like, I just want to be on the mat and just be around here. But in the back of my brain, I knew that I was doing it and it was just for me. And it was because it was my own why this time. And as we got closer, I told everybody. And then that year I got bronze at Olympic trials. And so I trained for 2.5 months and after like two and a bit years off. And it was such a different feeling. Like when I lost my semi, I was walking off the mat and I just remember thinking, let me try again. I can do that one better. Like, give me one more opportunity. And then I was like, okay, that's what it's supposed to feel like. Like, that's what sport is supposed to feel like and enjoying it is supposed to feel like and doing it for the right reasons is supposed to feel like. And that just kind of kickstarted this whole senior career.
Wow, that made me so emotional. My eyes started watering when you said that. I didn't realize that you had only trained for such a brief, I mean, years leading up to that, but like after 2.5 years off, that doesn't give you the nod that like this is your path.
Yeah.
Wow. And I love that statement. I feel like that's one of those quotes that's forever going to resonate with me now is just why not is like not enough of a why. That's amazing. And I think, honestly, I think all high level athletes probably get to that point of almost resenting their sport at some point because I think burnout's almost inevitable, like it just sounds like you emotionally burn out and you need that break to get perspective and remember why you love it and start craving, wrestlers are different beasts. Anybody who craves that. That's so cool. So what has your experience been like then from that Olympic trials to now? Because you're training as an athlete full time, right?
That's
And
right.
you had gone, so talk to me about transitioning from working in the workforce post business degree Did you pursue nursing? How did your career shift to now being a full-time athlete?
Yeah, so leading into that Olympic trials, I was obviously I was in the post-degree program, so it was a 2-year program. And so I was in the thick of that condensed program while I was prepping for trials and realized, okay, this is possible. Like I'm making it work. And that following February was the February that COVID hit. And so that was when like I was just getting all this momentum going finally. And then COVID hit and it shut everything down. It was like, okay, we'll find a way, we'll figure it out, we'll, get workouts in it where we can, how we can, practices, we'll make it work. And so it was hard because the element that I'm missing is that international competition, that international feel. And so I've always been a varsity wrestler. And now I had this whole quad where I could start getting that. And then we lost the first half of that quad. And it was just like, oh, but we did what we could with what we had, essentially. And last February, things were just starting to open up internationally. And so my coach basically said, look for anything that you can find for training or tournament or anything, like you need to get abroad. And I was following Sophia Matson on Instagram. She's one of like 4 wrestlers that I followed. She's a 3-time Olympian. She's a bronze medalist, world champion, like very decorated wrestler. And she had taken a picture of a poster of a camp and posted it on her Instagram story. And so I screenshot that and sent it to my coach. I said, what about this? And he's like, yeah, message her. I was like, you want me to DM Sophia Matson? Like and say what? I'm this random person from Canada and I'd love to come down. And he's like, yes, that's what you should do. And that's kind of what kickstarted it off. And so she was so supportive. She was so great. She was like, yeah, absolutely come down. So trained there for a couple of weeks, made some really great connections, met my now boyfriend over here. And
Wow.
it was a very rewarding trip. And they're 53, so a weight class above me. She's a European champion. She is great, but she doesn't have very many partners either. And so we've made this really great connection where I've now been there a few times, but that kind of kickstarted it. So I was there for training. I basically was just searching for any opportunities to train. So she introduced me to the France coach, and then I did a training camp there, and then I made a connection with someone in Iowa, and then it was like from Iowa to Minneapolis, and it was just like scrambling. It was, I need to make this happen for myself. And I was still nursing at the time. Like I still had a job and was working around all this travel, and then just realized like, this is affecting my training. I'm doing everything, but I'm not doing it quality, like to the best I can. And so I decided I'm going to leave it. I'm going to leave my jobs. I'm going to leave financial stability, and I'm committing to this 100%. And so that was kind of into this summer. So I competed at nationals in May. I got second. It was my very first senior nationals ever at 29 years old, which was just so funny. It was like this running joke that I could earn the rookie award at, at 29 years old.
Congratulations. That's huge.
Yeah, and it just kind of went from there. And so I had my first big round of tournaments this summer. From there, unfortunately, my brother got sick and passed away. And so that kind of took me away this fall. And then it was trying to come back from that. And so then it was, trying to get myself back on the mat and get myself back into like a healthy mental state. And then tournaments were starting again. And so then all of a sudden it was like, hey, January, we're going to go down. We're going to Europe. We're going to stay in Europe for 2 months. We're going to hit all these different tournaments, all these training camps. And then my first one, I got a concussion and I had to come home. And it was just like one thing after another. And so then I came home and got healthy enough just in time to go back to Sweden a couple of weeks ago, where I got second at it was my very first international medal. And so it's just been like, every time I've gotten so close to getting myself in the right position, something has happened. And then we just like, okay, that sucks. Back to it. And then it's like a little bit of reward every time. So it's like, okay, you medaled at Sweden. You got second place. That was huge. Now I come back and it's just like, okay, now I'm dealing with getting myself healthy for nationals again. And so it's just, I think this is the reality of wrestling. This is the reality of being in a high caliber sport, but that wellness piece to it has been so critical in making sure that every time I've hit a road bump, small, big, life-changing, whatever, it was like, okay, we'll reset, get your mind healthy, get your heart healthy, your body will come. like the body will come after that kind of thing. So it's been a roller coaster. It's been a lot.
So much adversity. I
Mhm.
mean, and I'm so sorry to hear about your brother, like just to have to go through grief and everything on top of this and COVID. Like I know you guys were having to you had to like train with your unit of people, like however many people you were allowed. And I think in other sports it was a little bit different, like wrestling, because you're so enclosed with people, like there's no social distancing and
No,
like
absolutely not.
or wearing a mask, like that's just not really. Wow. So how much has being a full-time athlete shifted things for you? Like being able to put all of your energy, do you feel like you've just had this huge compound effect with that?
Yeah, definitely. It's been, I mean, there's pros and cons to everything. So now I am able to give it all of my energy, but now there's a financial component. And so now I'm working on sponsorship or how to get involved in different ways that still supports my wrestling, that brings in a financial piece.
Mhm.
Um, but even within that, I am doing it in ways where I'm promoting wrestling or coaching wrestling, or everything is still fully focused around wrestling. And that has completely changed. It's completely changed my performance, my mind, usually it was like you jam pack your day, you barely get to practice in time, you're huffing and puffing as you walk into the room, you're putting your boots on, and you go in and you just do whatever your coach says and you give it your all, and then you go home and you get to bed and it's just like you're exhausted. It's like, yes, I'm checking all these boxes. Yes, I'm getting to my workouts. Yes, I'm getting to my practices. Yes, I'm getting to work and I'm putting out fires here and there. But then I was realizing it was like, I don't even remember what we did at practice. Like, I don't even know what my goal was going into practice. And so now it's like, I have a practice plan within my coach's practice plan. I have time for visualization within that. I have time to take a quick nap if I have to and focus on meal prepping properly so that I'm fueled for it, so that I can get a good night's sleep at night. And like, it's affected all of these other pillars that are so critical to performing at a high level. And I think that's where it's like that compounding effect of every element of sport.
I bet. Well, and I think preventing burnout again, right? Because you're not just putting out fires. And at that international level, there are Olympic teams who for years athletes are full-time athletes, right?
Yeah.
Like we don't have that here, especially women's wrestling. That's like a whole nother
Yeah.
conversation. But so for you to have got bronze at an Olympic trial after 2.5 months back on the mat, balancing all of that, like I can only imagine how beneficial that is. And so how's the financial side going? What are you doing? Like, are you getting coaching roles? How are you fundraising? Again, especially being even in a smaller city, I feel like the sponsorships and everything that is a big barrier because there's not a lot of full-time athletes here.
No, it's uh I've actually been doing some interviews with athletes from different provinces and seeing what does this look like for you. And for a lot of them, their clubs are so well funded, either federally, provincially, or just they've locally gotten it. Like BC is huge, Ontario is huge. There's some programs, we know Brock has a lot of money behind them, things like that. Our program is built by people that have other full-time jobs and are doing this on the side, like they're teachers, they've got so many other things going on and they're trying to give everything they can to wrestling. So usually most athletes are getting it from their club, and my club supports me so much with everything they can, but I'm, like you said, trying to do these international competitions and tournaments, and those are all very expensive. So I've gotten some sponsorship that has covered this year, a lot of this year. And I'm currently working on an idea with my younger brother. It's called Squad. And it's just an idea behind being able to monetize your community of support systems. So there's a lot of athletes, like their only option is to do fundraisers, to do, beer nights or steak nights or whatever their go-to is. And we're such a busy world now. We're such a busy society. And for people to come down to that, it takes a lot more effort, and for the athlete to plan that takes a lot of effort. And what we are finding is a lot of my support system, they want to see the behind the scenes, they want to see match reviews, they want to hear about what it's like traveling, they want to hear about what it's like cutting weight. Like, wrestling is still a largely unknown sport, and a lot of that information I am happy to give to my community of supporters, but not necessarily to put out on the public web, for anyone to come and see. And so if there's a way that I can offer that behind the scenes experience for my friends, my family, my community of supporters, and they're able to offer a small financial component for me, it's such a win-win. So we're kind of toying with that. It's a new idea, but that's been pretty helpful recently. And otherwise, it's just about finding little bits of fundraising.
I have seen that. Because are you doing it through Patreon?
Yes, right now we're toying with Patreon as the kind of platform. And then if the model is proven, then we would be able to build our own platform for it. Because Patreon actually takes so much, like such a big cut from the person using it. So as an athlete, if Patreon's able to take up like 12% plus from my donations, then I don't know. We're kind of playing with that idea a little bit, but
Well, and I think people who support you want to know that too. Like they want those funds just to go to you. And of course, there needs to be a platform to facilitate it. But that's so cool because I didn't realize that you and your brother were doing that
yeah.
together. And yeah, then you can pass that formula off to other athletes who are trying to do the same thing. How awesome. And I feel like it must be really motivating to feel like, okay, these are my people. Like, they've got my back, they're vouching for me, and they also feel like they're contributing to your success. I feel like the synergy of that dynamic would be really powerful.
Exactly. Yeah, that's honestly it. I love getting to take them along for the ride. I love getting to show them all the bits and pieces and ins and outs of wrestling, A, and international competition, B. Like it's just something that no one really knows about, especially in Saskatoon, Saskatchewan, we don't get to see much of that. So
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. Still, it's like everybody knows hockey and like the traditional, Canadian sports. That is very cool. And then I see you work with like specific gyms and services within Saskatoon, which is great because you get that service component, which of course otherwise you'd be paying for out of pocket. But this allows you to have that like just financial component as well. So beyond your wrestling training, you're obviously doing weight training and cross training. Do you do any like mindset training? What do you do for recovery and other specifics that you're doing like week to week, day to day as well?
yeah, so I have kind of my sports med team. I've got my physio chiro massage to help me with the physical component. I also see a sports psychologist with he's linked up, he is a professor at the university, but he's done some sports like with lots of professional athletes and Olympians and whatnot. So I'm very, very grateful to have access to him. And a lot of that is covered through Sask Sport. And then working with Ignite Athletics, who makes all of my strength and conditioning programming. Outside of that, it's a lot of just figuring it out for yourself. So what do you need on top of it? And most of it is done in my living room and done on my own.
Good for you. Do you work with a nutritionist or do you do your own nutrition?
Yeah, I do. We do have access through Wrestling Canada to Heather Hines. She's actually located here in Saskatchewan, so she's the Canadian nutritionist. And so I've worked with her a few times, and I have kind of my general outline. And then I just think after like all of these years, I've sort of individualized it for myself. But at any time, like I remember we were in Madrid last summer, and it was so hot. It was unbelievable. It was like 44 degrees and it was an open air wrestling room. So there was no air conditioning, no nothing. And we were training twice a day and we had to walk there. By the time you got there, you're already drenched. And so we were having such a hard time staying hydrated. And we all just shot her an email from across the world and she instantly got back to us. So we've got those resources as
Wow.
well.
Was that summer of 2022?
Yeah.
I was in Madrid in the summer and yes,
Yeah.
it was very hot. Yeah. I mean, and I was loving it because I was just walking the streets, traveling, not having to wrestle in 45 degrees. So yeah, I bet. And just little things that, it's not like easy to access electrolytes. I couldn't find electrolytes there, which I never anticipated. And yeah, so doing the international travel, I mean, that does add a huge extra toll on your mind and body with adapting to time zone changes. So it's nice that when you're going, like to go for 2 months, for example, gives you time to adapt. Is there anything specific you do to kind of manage those adjustments?
My biggest tip for like jet lag essentially and just kind of transitioning into their time zone is to just join it as quickly as you can. So lots of times I'll end up being awake for about 24 hours, something that I would normally not do, but it allows me to just jump onto their time zone and then just try to get moving right away. Like your body will adjust to your activity level. And so if you can get up and get fresh air and get moving and try and stay active as best you can, and then doing all of the things that we hear preached but often don't follow, of no blue light before bed and drink lots of water and restrict your eating, after this time, and things like that that can help your like support your body and your mind to try to switch over. It's the small details that go the longest way. But yeah, it's tricky. You have to bring a lot of things with you, especially, I was in Tunisia and we were there for a ranking series tournament, and we were lucky to be at this beautiful resort, but we were eating resort food and we're trying to weight cut and then recover from your weight cut and then compete in Tunisia, and you're not familiar with the food, and there's bags going missing, left, right, and center with traveling. And so what can you pack in your carry-on, and what can you potentially risk having in your checked bag and things like that. So it's a whole juggle of trying to play with all those different details and elements, but yeah.
A lot of strategy. I mean, that's the thing. Competing at the level you are is stressful enough already, but to not let those components of travel and what could go wrong and just like trying to be as planned and have those insurance policies, I feel like the mindset and like the sports side of it, just in terms of not letting that cause stress, is so crucial.
Yeah, definitely.
Having those routines. So I would love to know, I feel like people would be so curious if you're willing to share, like, do you have like a normal day-to-day schedule, what a day in your life is like, and then like your weekly training schedule, like how many times a day and week are you training to be at this elite level as a wrestler?
Sure. Yeah, I can do my best. I'm not sure if I have a very structured day-to-day routine. Um, for the most part, we practice in the evenings every day. Every odd time we'll practice early in the morning, but usually it's 5 to 7 in the evening, and so that's everything gets based around that then. And so usually I would wake up, I do my journaling, I make my coffee and feed my dog, and do my journaling and some reading, and then do some yoga, stretching, recovery, some combination of that. I will then usually have some sort of appointment, so like a physio appointment or something kind of late morning. I like to do my strength and conditioning workouts around lunchtime, so it gives me lots of time to recover before practice. So either doing a lift, like a strength specific lift, or some element of cardio. So that just kind of depends if I'm leading into a tournament, if I need to add more cardio in or not. If it's something I can do at home, can I just go for a nice run with my dog, or just go out and get a little bit extra activity? Afternoon is kind of a total miscellaneous. There's either admin work or different appointments, or trying to schedule in some social time or see my family or things like that. And then my evening essentially just belongs to wrestling. So leaving around 4 o'clock to get there in time to get my mind settled and think about what practice is going to be, practice 5 to 7. We have a junior husky program as well that practices right after us twice a week. So I like to stay and coach those ones on those days. And then otherwise you're staying there to get a sauna in or some sort of recovery after practice. And then it's home and maybe a bath if your body's sore or something you eat. And then all of a sudden it's, 9:30, 10 o'clock. So that's kind of a mishmash day.
I mean, that's amazing though, because imagining where you would be able to even fit working in, right? Like this is a full-time job. So do you envision going back to nursing, or is that even on your mind? You're just like one day at a time right now?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a one day at a time right now with nationals on the horizon, but nursing is something that I really love, and the longer I leave it, the harder it's going to be to go back. So it's definitely something I've got my eye on as to getting back to it in the near-ish future. Everything is super dependent on nationals. So the whole next 8 to 9 months of scheduling is dependent on nationals. And so that's hard to do when you're a planner and you want to, have a bit of control over or agency over your life. And it's been a constant readjustment about being like, it doesn't matter what happened. Like, I don't need to know right now. And it's just nationals. We just focus on nationals first. Whatever happens after that, we've got a few soft plans. But nursing will definitely be worked in there somewhere.
That's so exciting. And how do you feel like, well, just like, I mean, obviously being an athlete your whole life, you know this, but also from nursing, I'd love to talk about the cutting weight component, because for people listening that don't know anything about wrestling, that is just a totally foreign concept. So talk to us about cutting weight, what that experience is like for you, and then just like the health component of it as well.
So weight cutting is, I think, very different if you're a high level athlete than if you're a varsity or high school athlete. The way that I used to cut weight forever put such a sour taste in my mouth with wrestling. Like, it was definitely a negative experience. It's not fun. So I guess for anyone that doesn't know what weight cutting is, wrestling's a weight specific sport. So there's weight categories, which makes it really great because it means that all bodies and all types and all sizes can compete in a very fair way. However, when you get closer to really big tournaments, if you are at the high end of your weight class, meaning you're the heaviest, it's kind of the wrong word, but the strongest or the biggest person in your weight class, you have a size advantage over the people that are lighter in your weight class. And so that can be the difference between winning or losing a championship. And so that kind of gets carried away to the point where people are they'll be looking to cut 3, 4, 5, up to 7 kilos just to get down to a weight class. And it's so hard on your body if you do these really big weight cuts and you don't do them properly and you don't do them in a healthy manner. It's detrimental to your performance. It's detrimental to your mind. Like, weight cutting it makes you crazy. Like, you're water loading yourself, you're dieting down, you water load, and then you try to cut all that water out of you, usually within 24 hours of that weigh-in. And so you're stripping it, you're sauning, you're doing cardio, you're doing everything you can to just like wring your body out like a sponge. And it's so detrimental to your health and to your sport and to your performance and to your well-being. And it's just, I don't know a single wrestler that enjoys it or thinks that it's a positive thing, but it's just a really difficult thing to get around because of the realities of it being a weight category sport. As I've transitioned into senior, I wrestle 50 kilos, so I'm the lightest weight class. I sit around 53 eating normally. I'm able to diet down to about 51, which means my weight cut is pretty much non-existent. I will still eat up until, 12 hours before the weigh-in. I'll still, be getting my coffee in and some fruits and some protein and a little bit of carbs to give myself the energy. And so that my body, because ultimately I want my body to compete at its best the next day. And if you're rebounding from this big weight cut, like, how good are you at, you do all this training all season long just for your body to feel terrible on the day of performance. Like, in what other sport do you imagine them not putting the best fuel in their body to compete at the best of their ability on competition day? So this is my little soapbox about weight cutting. But for me, weight cutting is not nearly as it's not a big part of my wrestling because I sit so close to it. And that was a big reason why I came back, is because they had switched the weight classes, and they also switched the rules. Oh my gosh, was that like 5 years ago, maybe, to same day weigh-ins. So now you weigh in and 2 hours later you have to compete. And that was to deter people from doing those really big weight cuts.
That's the thing. It's a necessary evil, but they're at least trying to bring parameters in to keep people from sacrificing their health. Because yeah, it's that balance of where are you going to be most efficient as an athlete. You can't sacrifice that. So what's your nutrition like? Do you have a specific approach to your nutrition in terms of like a theory to nutrition? Is it very intuitive?
Definitely intuitive. I'm a little bit loosey-goosey with my nutrition because I naturally sit very close to my weight class. And so I usually fuel my body with what I feel like it's asking for or it needs. Sometimes that gets out of hand because it's more like hormonal. And so it's like I'm craving sweets. And so I have to be very wary of that. That's where kind of the athletic discipline has to come in. But ultimately, I'm usually able to tell if like, okay, I'm not very hungry. I just need to get some good protein in my body, and maybe some carbs or some sugars right before practice just to give me that really big kick or like a kick. And then just to make sure that I'm kind of getting in the base components at the stages of my day that are really critical. And then around that, I kind of just go off of how my body is feeling. So as I'm leading into big competitions, I am cleaning that up a little bit. I am leaning it out a bit, focusing more on really healthy carbs, lots of protein, like as much protein as I can fill, but like very clean protein. Lots of veggies because it feels good. It feels good to eat. It feels good to like munch and chew and things. And there's lots of obviously good nutrients to your veggies and fruits, but it just kind of gets stripped down to like high protein and then your little bit of sugar and carbs for where you really need it when you're training 4 to 5 hours a day.
Yeah. Yeah. Strategic, but intuitive. I like that. And with as your focus kind of intensifies, you make those adjustments. Do you feel like your experience as a wrestler has been unique being a female? Like when you started, I mean, probably every year you've seen more and more women joining the sport, where I think now it's like almost a 50-50 split, would you say?
Oh yeah, for sure.
Do you feel like your experience is unique as a female wrestler, or are you just a wrestler?
I think that I am uh I'm very lucky to naturally sit so close to a weight class. I know there are some females that aren't as close and they're kind of stuck right in between. And I'm a nurse, but I'm also very open. I have an IUD, which helps regulate my menstrual cycle, which means I'm not having such big shifts and flows every month. But a lot of the females that don't, like, that's a huge component to their weight cut. That's a huge component to their diet, how much they're able to lift, how much they're able to train. I feel really lucky that my body doesn't have those big swings, but it's largely because I have this IUD and because I've had really good experiences with my IUD. It's not for everybody. Not everybody has had those great experiences. I have. I also sit close to my weight class and my body doesn't shift very much, but that I would say is closer to an outlier experience as a female.
Yeah.
Not super common.
That's a really great point. And you know what, this has been on my mind. I don't know if you saw the Tiger Woods like tampon joke.
No, I haven't.
Oh, Tiger Woods. Okay, I pay zero attention to golf, but the gist of it, which ironically I saw this post on a like female sports page called The Gist, which if you don't follow, that's very good. And Tiger Woods like outshot someone or whatever, did great at golf, good for him. And then he handed a tampon off to his opponent, basically being, you know, like inferring you're shooting like a girl. And the response from the female athletic community has been so badass because they're like, we can do that while bleeding. Like all of these, like
Yeah,
you're saying
exactly.
that as if it's an insult. If anything, it should be a compliment because like look at all the badass things that women are doing despite those fluctuations and the extra challenge that puts on your body through all of your phases. So yeah, that's an amazing point. Do you ever feel like, I mean, I started wrestling, first of all, never even moderately close to the caliber that you were, but when I was a little bit younger, like I was 10 when I started. And at that point, it was still very, like, quite rare for females to wrestle. So, like, I would go to camps and sometimes be the only woman, or, well, woman, I was 10, girl, you know, or like have to wrestle, like, compete against the boys because there were no girls in my weight class and those things. And then just kind of like almost getting teased. Again, you starting in high school, maybe you were able to kind of negate some of those things, but have you ever felt like mentally or emotionally there was any kind of strain or pressure, you know, being the female in the room?
Yeah, I'm so lucky. So I grew up with three brothers and a sister, and I was sandwiched between my younger brother is 14 months younger than me, and Josh was 2 years older than me. So and then my oldest sister was 5 years older than that. So they were kind of like my older two siblings were much older. And then it was kind of the three of us, and we were just like the three musketeers. Like we just got into trouble together and played together and did everything together. So I grew up with brothers that were roughhousing and we played hockey and it was it was very normal for me. Like I never grew up I didn't grow up in a place where these were my female roles. The boys got to do this. There were some times where I had to fight to get to go work out at the barn with my dad instead of having to stay and clean the house with my mom. But I fought those battles and I won the battles, but it just all kind of led into, by the time I got into the wrestling room, I was already so proud to be playing hockey. I thought that was so cool. I felt very badass for doing it. In elementary school, the Comets played some of the rec boys teams and we beat them. And so it was just like, it was so much empowerment with that. And so when I got to the wrestling room in high school, there was only two other females and they were way bigger than me. Like I think I was 40 kilos soaking wet. I was so small. And so I only trained with boys, but I loved it. Like I thought it was so cool that my older brother was in the room too, and he was wrestling the heavier boys, but then I was in the lightweight corner kicking ass, and they would all be teasing each other, be like, "You're getting beat by a girl," and I was so motivated by that. I thought that was so fun, and I had a coach that totally empowered that. Like Dave Elder was just the best. And my brother was there and I knew he always had my back. And so I had maybe just like super naive. Like I was unaware of all of the teasing that probably did happen, but I was so empowered by like the few people that I really respected. And I really believed in myself and I thought that it was badass. And so I was just going to keep doing it. And then eventually more girls came in and then our girls team won cities. And then it was like, our team is badass and look at what girls can do. And I love sharing that word, spreading that word in high school and then getting to university and showing like, this is what a wrestler can look like too. It's not just your stereotypes. And so it started off very young for me, but like I was unaware of it for so long. And then by the time I got to a high level, I looked around and realized that Wrestling Canada internationally is it's like 90% women. We do so well on the female side. All of our, like the majority of our Olympians are women. The majority of our international medals yearly are women. Like we have such a badass women team. And it just kind of increased that motivation even more. I don't know. I just get so excited about it.
That's amazing. Do you try to recommend like young women get in any sport? Do you think there's benefits specifically to wrestling? Like you've been such a multi-talented athlete from rodeo to hockey. Yeah. What specific lessons do you feel like come from wrestling that you don't get in other sports?
Wrestling is so unique in my opinion. It teaches you such physical literacy. It teaches you, there's so much gymnastics involved. There's so much strength and conditioning involved. You need to be fast, but also strong, but also strategic, but also, have some guts behind you. And so there's so many different elements that wrestling requires. And you are only in control of yourself, but you're also trying to predict what someone else is going to do, but also try to enforce them to want to do something. And it's just like this human chess game. And you're constantly battling your own demons. Every time it's like, this is going to be really hard. They could be better than me. There's nobody out on that mat except for me. I can't hide behind anything. And that's such an important lesson to learn at a young age, in my opinion. And what you learn about your body and what you learn about, it doesn't matter if you're tall, if you're short, if you're stocky, if you're scrawny, if you're anything, it's just how can you put yourself in the best place to be the best athlete? And so maybe you're a little bit more scrawny, but you're so lightning quick. Then that means that you get to use that strength, but then also have to work on some of your weaknesses to kind of bridge that gap. And I just like wrestling requires so much from you. And I had been asked this earlier this year about what my favorite thing about wrestling was. And I really had to think about it because there's so many elements to it. But my favorite thing about wrestling is that it seeks out all your weaknesses and it broadcasts them back to you over and over and over again until you're willing to either change them and get rid of them or turn them into a strength. And it requires you to be the best of every part of you, the best discipline, the best ambition, the best, want and try, and you have to enjoy it and you have to, try so hard and hit a wall and then work past that wall and be a teammate. You need your team to be able to train. You need your team to be able to to push you, and iron sharpens iron. Like there's so many different cliche sayings that I think apply to wrestling, but I think getting involved in wrestling, I encourage people to try all sports. I think that if you want to be the best wrestler later on in life, having a variety of a background is in your benefit. So go try all those things. Do a little bit of everything. It all is it's gonna serve a purpose eventually at some point. But if you want to put your kids in wrestling or get started in wrestling, it's so powerful. Like it's just, you learn games, you learn work ethic, you learn. I'm biased, but I just love it.
I mean, I'm biased too. But do you know what? Like, I think we're very similar in the sense that we're biased because we were in other sports, and even despite getting what you get from other sports, can still say wrestling is so unique in like this very special way. And I think as a woman, like, so empowering, not it's not empowering for all genders, but I don't know, there's just something that where it's like I want all girls to experience this growing up, because it built so much confidence and resilience and just all of these character building traits that you can get from different sports in a different way. And I think having that combination of like experience in a team sport, but then wrestling where it is very individualized. But I like that you highlighted there is such a big team component. And I think people don't realize that if they're not in it and haven't experienced it, where, yeah, it's just you out there on the mat in a match, but it's really not, because it's all of the training partners who have got you there that are cheering for you, your coach on the side, like when you can just hear your coach's voice and nothing else in the corner, like it's so special. I'm so happy that you came back to it. Jane Pacoda, did you train with me? We trained jiu-jitsu together, and we recently joked that I have all my wrestling eligibility, but I'm currently an online student at the U of S,
Oh my gosh.
and she has 1 year left. I'm like, should we go do some old lady wrestling?
Yes, honestly.
Oh my God. I'm like, well, it would be entertaining, that's for sure. So anyways, you inspire me in the biggest way personally and as an athlete. And I know that this is going to inspire so many people. So you have nationals coming up next weekend.
Yes.
And where are those?
Those are in Waterloo, Ontario.
And then when is trials?
So Olympic trials are this December in Edmonton. So December, I think 14th.
I didn't realize they were in Edmonton. Wow.
Mm-hmm.
And so that is just blinders on until then.
Yeah.
Good
Yeah,
for you.
everything. I mean, even nationals sets up the seating, it sets up the ladder. So it obviously plays a really huge role. But ultimately everything is working towards Olympic trials. Every tournament that we choose between now and then, every training camp we choose, everything is towards putting myself in the best position for Olympic trials.
Shashi, I cannot wait to follow along. I'm going to be in your squad.
Yay!
I can't wait. Okay. I want to be mindful of your time because I know you've got to get to training and everything else. So I have quick, just rapid fire questions that I like to ask everyone. Who is your biggest role model?
Oh my gosh. I have so many. I think now, just because of everything that's happened, I think my brother is my biggest role model. I think just trying to, oh, I'm gonna get emulate his life, the way that like he was such a fun and worked so hard, but like loved life more than anybody I know. So I think that like he probably is the one that comes to mind first.
Sweet. Thank you for sharing.
Yes.
What is the best advice you've ever received?
Oh, the best advice I've ever received. I've had some really good tidbits. I think probably know your why is the thing that has played the biggest role in all of my decisions in wrestling and life and career and everything. It's just know your why.
Best book or resource you'd recommend to people?
I recently finished Grit by Angela Duckworth.
Love that
I thought
one.
it was so interesting. It just like she really takes a scientific look at what that grit factor is. And I just started reading, it's called Tough. I can't remember who wrote it. I'll look it up. But he kind of builds off of some of those components and puts a lot of actionable items into it. So the combination between those two are like
I'll
Great.
link them. I read Grit in the Summer, and I mean, you can't not think about wrestling. Like the whole time, I'm like, this is why it's so, yes, this is why it's so amazing. Like, absolutely, so awesome. Love that one. Um, what is your personal mantra or any words you live by?
Mm, currently, I am resilient is something that I've just been repeating a lot, especially with all the obstacles that have been popping up. Um, I think one that often comes to mind is it'll all be okay in the end. If it's not okay, it's not the end. And that can be fought in so many different directions. A lot of people will try to disband that and whatnot, but I think it's just something that, you know, you lean on mantras when things are hard. And so when things are hard, when it's not okay, it's like, okay, this isn't the end. You're working through something. So I think that's an easy one that just pops up a lot for me.
I love that one. And finally, last but not least, for everyone who wants to learn more about you, follow along on your journey, be a part of your squad, where can they find you?
Yeah, join my squad. You can follow me on Instagram. It's Katie Dutchak, so it's just my full name. On there, the link to my squad page, you can find that there as well. But just between squad and Instagram is where all of my tidbits and information and the journey is.
Yes, and I'll link it all on my website. And I just want to thank you so much for spending the time. There's no one that I could have thought of to better represent International Women's Day and Women's Week. I was like, I want to have someone specific and intentional on this week. And you were the first person that came to mind. So it has been an absolute honor. And I can't wait to hear about all your success and congratulations on everything you've achieved so far.
Thank you so much. I am so happy to talk wrestling and wellness and all things sport and female, and I had the best time. So thank you so much for thinking of me.
Yes, well, we'll talk to you soon.
Sounds good.